I get baptized and everybody tells me you're going to feel warm and fuzzy. I didn't. And so I immediately thought something is wrong with me, but in order to fit in, I have to make sure that I say that's how I felt. And I remember distinctly telling people, yeah, I felt warm and fuzzy. And then I get my baptism book. I wrote warm and fuzzy. I remember specifically writing warm and fuzzy because I thought if anybody ever reads this, like, I have to toe the line, right? Even if I'm lying, I have to toe the line.
I don't know how you get Joe Rogan's energy without having to like be a TV host and just talk to people constantly, learning how to do that for, I don't know, 30 years or however long he's been doing it. Right.
And I feel like Joe Rogan has the mystical, magical ability to empty his mind. Like,
he's one of the best listeners I've ever watched in action.
Yeah. Sometimes there are some moments where you watch when
well,
you're
that's
like,
the other thing is like he does so many shows per week. It's like, I don't know how you manage to do that. Even, I mean, there's some points where it's like so obvious, like, what are you doing, man? But it's then, but then like within context, it's like the level of consistency is quite impressive.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I've learned from podcasting over time is that everybody has something interesting to say. And so I think if you can figure out how to get that out of the guest, you're going to have a good show no matter what.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I mean, but the reason I even wanted to do this project in general was like, I had a really abstract sense of that like, okay, if I just kind of put myself in, like lock myself in a room where like, okay, somebody's expecting to talk to me for 2 hours, I'm going to have to just either get better at listening to people or get better at talking and bullshitting for a long time, which maybe I'm getting better at both. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. I'll be the judge. I'll let you know at the end of this if it went well or not.
But man, yeah, the reason we decided we wanted to do this was because you mentioned kind of in passing when we were doing your show was that you had grown up in specifically the Mormon Church, the Latter-day Saints Church, because I in this past week I've done a little bit of now I had to dig in a little bit, so I started doing some research to see there are different denominations of Mormons as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of different sects of Mormonism. It's kind of generally considered, the Latter-day Saint movement, the Mormon movement is kind of all grouped in there, and the denomination I grew up in is the largest one. It claims 16 million members worldwide, but that's what's on the books, not butts and seats, right?
Okay. Is it kind of like a lot of countries are sort of nominally Catholic, where it's like, okay, well, there's 14 million Catholics in Russia or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Except there are the difference, I think, is the commitment. Like, if people are committed to the church, they show up every single week, right? Whereas, like, I think you'll find a lot of Catholics who don't show up every week, but are still like, I'm Catholic.
Yeah.
The Mormons who don't show up every week usually don't consider themselves Mormon.
Okay.
Obviously, there's a lot of gray area there, but yeah. So I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That was
okay. Where a mouthful of a denomination.
It is, and within the past couple of years, they've started demanding that they be referred to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints instead of as Mormons. And
I've noticed that because I recently I don't know why, I think maybe I saw an ad or something. Actually, I have seen a few different ads for the Mormon Church, or just like, it's interesting because something will just pop up and say like, are you looking for meaning in life? Or like, are you just really sad and like you just need something in your life to give you happiness again? Or it's like it's interesting, like pitching a religion like in an ad. Which, I mean, I that kind of makes sense given the way the internet has shaped the way we communicate and the way that we sell things. It's just like, it's weird selling a culture, I guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like selling it is huge. Going to church growing up, it was always people are going to be watching you. You know, people will be seeing your actions, and if they see the light of Christ in your eyes, they'll want to come to church and they'll get baptized and blah blah blah,
Right.
right? And so that was a huge thing, was always it was like always be selling, right? Always be closing, just to it was just so ingrained in you.
And sorry, I didn't want to come out of the gate swinging,
Culture.
like pointing out things that I thought were weird. Like this is not
No,
this at all. Like
no.
the interesting thing that I was really looking forward to about this is just kind of hoping to sort of compare your experience to my own, because there's a level in which almost every, at least most of the Christians that I know, especially evangelical Christians that sort of grew up Christian, had some level of the experience of like realizing, oh, the way these, this Bible and the way these sacred texts and this soul religion was pitched to me isn't quite the way it is. And, or at least it doesn't seem to be to me based on what I seem to know now. And like,
Right.
So anybody I know that like still wants to identify as Christian has at least gone through some sort of experience of like sort of rejecting certain things about their faith, maybe the entire thing, maybe coming back to it. But well, I mean, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but I'm wondering what it was like getting, like, I don't even know where to start. How did you, let's start before you left. Growing up in this.
Yeah.
Did you, I mean, this was just normal to you, right? I mean, everybody else around, I assume, like all your peers.
Yep.
It wasn't,
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a mysterious, like I'm part of a cult, or I don't know how you would describe it.
No, yeah. I thought, I thought this was just the culture. This was the group of people I was raised with and grew up with. I was born and raised in South Calgary in Canada, and it's like the Mormon hub of Canada.
Okay.
And so I went to school with a lot of other Mormon kids, and that was just normal, right? And those were all my friends growing up. And so to me, it was just normal. That's just what we did. I spent 20 plus hours a week doing church things, 3 hours a week at church on Sunday. Sometimes, since my parents were divorced, I'd go to church with my mom, and then I'd go to church with my dad after too, because I had friends in both congregations. And so I'd want
different
to
churches.
go, and spend time with them there. And then we had family home evening Monday nights, which is when the family gets together and does a little church lesson at home, and sometimes has snacks, sings a song, whatever. And then Wednesday nights or Tuesday nights, we would do scouts and stuff. Fridays, sometimes there was another activity with friends more casually. It was thing after thing after thing all the time, every single week for my whole life.
So you're it wasn't just like this is my religion, and so I occasionally, like once a week, I sort of go and pay tribute to the fact that I'm this religion. It's like it was a full life encompassing thing.
Everything. I never hung out with friends after school because of it, right? So I didn't have the opportunity to make friends outside of it because oh, sorry, I can't hang out after school. I have an activity tonight at church.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how much of that do you look back on now with some level of still like nostalgia or romanticism about it? It's just mostly, I mean, at this point, I assume you're still kind of really unpacking what this was to you.
Yeah. So I've been unpacking for a while. I mean, it's always an ongoing process. I don't think it'll ever stop, really. But for me, I look back on it pretty fondly. I'm still friends with some of these people. I went for lunch the other day with one of my seminary teachers, which was another thing we did. We went to seminary before school, and it was like a before school church class. Right. And that was 5 days a week, and I'm still friends with a lot of these people. And so I look back fondly on the friendships, on the relationships, because I don't think those were fake. Right. And being gone now and being out now, it's pretty apparent that they weren't fake. There certainly were some friendships that relied on me showing up to church on Sundays or to the activity on Wednesdays in order to nurture that relationship. But the real close friends that I made, though, they're still real close friends. We just kind of have this slight change in how we make contact.
Yeah. And that's always the hard thing, is just like I've noticed kind of watching so many of my peers, and you've just kind of listening to different people online talk about their experiences of sort of deconstructing their religious upbringing. And some people, I mean, it's really easy to kind of get sucked into this trap of just thinking everything about it and everything associated with it was just evil and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And all those people were just liars and trying to fool you. And like, I don't think that's what I was thinking as I was kind of just meditating on this whole what is Mormonism this past week, because you told me I got to check out the Book of Ether. So I read most of the Book of Ether, most of the Book of First Nephi. And I started out, I was thinking like, yeah, got my handy Book of Mormon right here.
Very nice, very good.
But I started out and I was like, okay, this might be interesting. The first comparison that came to mind, I was like, oh, is this going to be like, if this guy's good at sort of creating a world and creating a story? I don't know. For some reason, the comparison came of like Tolkien and like creating Middle Earth, and it's like, whoa, this could be kind of cool. But as I got through it just, I don't know. Well, I mean, maybe I should ask you a little bit of your feeling about looking back. I mean, did you have to read the whole Book of Mormon yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
There were two books that I read as a minor. So I've never been a big reader, but there were two books I read before turning 18. Now, since I've become a bit more of a reader, but before I turned 18, I read Catching Fire, the second book in the Hunger Games series, and the Book of Mormon. And I think I read the Book of Mormon twice, like beginning to end. And then, of course, I, would read different passages, and sometimes I'd restart. Everybody jokes like, oh, everybody's read First Nephi, 10 times more than they've read any other book, right? Because you start it and then you kind of stop reading, and then you go back and start at the beginning again.
So you didn't read anything else, like no chapter.
I mean,
like you didn't even read like the Mormon canonical good fiction Orson Scott Card. You didn't read Ender's Game, that whole series?
No. I read the odd chapter of a book that I had to do for book reports in school. But other than that, I just read to get enough information. Catching Fire I read for pleasure, and the Book of Mormon I read because I was supposed to.
Was it just like there was a secret like black market copy of Catching Fire getting passed around at school, and you happened to get your hands on it and were allowed to read it?
No, my sister.
You just didn't have time.
She was a big Hunger Games fan.
Okay,
and we had to read the Hunger Games for one of my junior high classes, and I read most of it, enough to kind of keep up with the class. And then I was like, okay, that was good. And then I lost my iPod and had no games to play. So I read a book instead. That's how I read Catching Fire.
Okay. So before that, your kind of escape from the routine of life and from all the different events that were happening was iPod gaming?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, we played so many iPod games. And I mean, we had YouTube. I think I would have had Minecraft at some point in there. I'm not sure at what point we got that on our computer. It wasn't like our house was locked down and we were only allowed to read certain books or anything. But I've just never been a big reader. So my choice of entertainment was just iPod games. Lots of Cube Runner, if anybody remembers.
Yeah, I actually think I played that one.
Yeah. Well, that was my favorite.
Because in my house, there was... I assume there was probably at least restrictions on to some extent about media. Like if there's like in evangelical households, it was pretty common to okay, if there's depending on how homeschooled you were, if there's even bad language in a movie, then you probably are not allowed to watch it. But maybe if you are more of just a general evangelical Christian, then maybe okay, you can, maybe a couple of swear words is all right, but we should probably stay away from nudity. That's bad. And also my parents were very, they're trying to look out for and try to be careful of witchcraft, right? They don't, anything
really?
that had magic in it.
Okay. Yeah, no, witchcraft was never a big concern in my family. That was never made a big deal out of. None of us read Harry Potter. I read it as an adult.
Hmm.
None of us read it, but it wasn't like banned in the household or anything. My stepdad played Dungeons and Dragons when he was a young adult, and so
Okay.
there wasn't really so much superstition around that. I think it's probably, at least in my experience, it was pretty rare for an LDS or Mormon family to be, really, really adamant about no witchcraft, no face cards. Those kind of superstitions weren't as common. No Ouija boards, though. That
Okay.
was definite
Yeah.
no in my house. But yeah, and then as far as media control goes, Sunday it was only church movies, which there's there are a few Latter-day Saint like Mormon comedies that we were allowed to watch, and we watched Veggie Tales and other stuff like that on Sundays, or just generally wholesome movies. And then during the week, most things were pretty okay as long as it was age appropriate, I guess.
Right.
And nudity and cursing was kind of
It
no,
was
but
iffy. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. But we weren't locked down. That
Right. Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm assuming, yeah, you can get an idea that like, okay, this is like a boxed off community, or it's like a North Korea situation.
Yeah. No, we lived in a suburb. That was, yeah, it was pretty normal, and really depends on the Mormon kid. Some Mormon kids would shelter themselves more than others. I definitely sheltered myself more than other Mormon kids, but that was my choice. I think I probably seemed weird even to my parents. They were like,
Right.
"You got to relax on this thing a little bit."
So what was it for you? You just had like a sense of like you wanted to like be, like please God or something, like you
Yeah,
just didn't want to.
yeah. Like I had to be as holy as possible, and so everything I did was to just try and make sure that I was doing that right. And so I remember there was a month where I just read the Book of Mormon, and there was a period of a few years where I listened to nothing but church music. Like, for years, I wouldn't listen to anything else unless I was in somebody else's vehicle and they were playing something. But when I was on my own, I would only play like Mormon Tabernacle Choir music.
Hmm.
And that's all I would listen to, because I was trying to feel that connection with God, right? At the back of the Book of Mormon, it says, oh, you're supposed to pray to know if these things are true, right? And I would pray and pray and pray, and I never got that answer. And so I thought,
Hmm.
well, I must, be doing something wrong. I must not be sincere enough. And
Yeah.
so I'd try and make sure that I was, keeping every commandment to the letter.
Jeez. So I imagine there was a lot of sort of like pent up guilt, or like just wondering, I don't know, like if you hadn't had that feeling, then it's like, why isn't this coming? I
Yeah.
I just need to be more holy.
Yeah, yeah, it's a huge thing in Mormonism that you have to be perfect, right? I mean, be therefore perfect, even as my Father in heaven is perfect, right? Like, that was the thing. You had to figure out how to always be better, how to always be worthy, and to top it off, we had regular worthiness interviews with our bishop, who is
Wow.
similar to like the priest or the pastor of the congregation, right? And that was every 6 months as a kid
It was a
growing up.
worthiness interview. So can you
Yes,
contrast that with like a Catholic
a
confession?
confession.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, conveniently, I've actually done Catholic confession before.
Okay.
So I have been through both experiences. Catholic confession, you go in, you sit down with the priest, and say there's like the whole
There's like a
ritual of.
divider, right? Too.
There is a divider sometimes, but when
Okay.
I did it, there wasn't. It was
Okay.
at like a big event, and he asked me. He says, "Have you been baptized?" Because I said I've never done this before, and I say, "Yeah, I've been baptized into another denomination." He says, "Okay, well, and then he walks me through the whole process, and I'm like, "Father, forgive me for I have sinned," or "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," and go through, confess all my sins. But it's a lot more casual, right?
Hmm.
The priest invites you to confess, and you say what's there, and then the priest gave me some words of wisdom, some advice, and that was kind of it. And he absolved me of my sins, and that was it. With a Mormon bishop, however, it's a regular checkup, and you go in and you sit down in front of this grown man, usually middle-aged, 50s, sometimes 60s. I had some younger bishops in their 30s, but then they ask you. They say, "Are you honest in your dealings with your fellow man?" Okay, yes. Then they ask you if you keep the law of chastity, which means no masturbation, no pornography, no sexual relationships at all outside of marriage.
So people were pretty good at lying then?
People were super good at lying. That's one of the first things I learned as a Mormon, right? Was you have to lie to get through this, right?
Jeez.
And but they ask these questions, and they're just supposed to ask these yes or no questions, and you give your response, yes or no, and then they mark it down. And if you're good to go, you're good to go. If you confess, which a lot of people do because they feel the guilt weigh on them,
right?
And then they confess, and then the bishop might ask follow-up questions. And this is where leadership roulette comes in, because some leaders will take the yes or no answer and just be like, okay, thank you, and others will pry, which they're not supposed to do.
Right.
But they will say, oh, do you keep the law of chastity? And you say no. If you say yes, I keep the law of chastity, they might say,
are you sure about that?
Oh, yeah. So no masturbation, no pornography. There are no girls at school that you're touching, and they might ask those kinds of questions and pry into it, which they're not supposed to do. But it's a lot more of an interrogation than a Catholic confession is, and they'll pry. And I'm sure in Catholic confession there are some priests who treat it as interrogation as well. I don't want to blanket that. I'm only speaking from one experience that I had. So
does it end though with an absolution, like your sins are forgiven and it's all good?
Again, depends on the bishop. Sometimes the bishop will say, and depending on the sin, this quote unquote sin, right? Sometimes the bishop will give you, certain instructions or encouragement, or just say, thanks for sharing this with me. I know some people, the bishop is like, I don't know how to deal with this. Go talk to your doctor about that and ask them if that's healthy, right? And that's the right way. If you're in that situation and somebody confesses something to you that you're worried about their health, send them to a doctor. You're a bishop, like you're a guy, maybe an accountant or a lawyer or something, right? That's not your job.
Yeah.
But the where was I going with that?
Well,
we
were just talking about whether or not there was a sense of like feeling forgiven at the end. Like, is it just I'm going to bring up everything you've done wrong, and now we're just going to think about that for a little while?
Yeah. So sometimes that's what it was. Sometimes it was like, okay, well, don't take the sacrament or communion, right? Don't take the sacrament for X number of weeks, sometimes a month, sometimes a year. And then the sacrament is a very public thing, right? In a Catholic mass, you get up and you walk up to the front and the priest hands you the wafer and the goblet, right? In a Mormon sacrament, the young men, the 12, 13-year-olds, come around with trays with little cups of water on them and little pieces of bread. And they'll hand it around.
It's water, eh? It's not wine or even grape
water,
juice or anything like that?
Yeah, no, it's just water. But they'll hand it around. And then, but then if you've sinned, you're not taking the sacrament, and everybody on your bench can see that, right? And so you're a teenager sitting there with your family. Nice. There's a lot of pressure to make sure you can take the sacrament every single week. And so again, teaching you to lie.
That is so, I mean, yeah, this is what I was saying, or like, as I started to try to read through the Book of Mormon, at first it was like, oh, this could be cool. And then it was like, oh, this is kind of funny. And then something clicked and I was like, no, wait, this is actually really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at it from the outside in, Mormonism, was like kind of just like a joke sometimes among my peers.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, they don't have it figured out. Obviously, we everything's fine on our end, but
And
it
that's
was
how
just
we
kind of
felt
something,
about you,
right?
right? We said the exact same thing about any other Christian religion, Muslims, like, any Buddhist
Right.
even, you know, although Buddhist, there was even in Mormonism, there's like an admiration for Buddhism
Interesting.
sometimes that a lot of people have. But there is still that sense of, even if you admire other religions, there's still oh, aren't they sweet?
Yeah.
They haven't figured it out yet, right?
Yeah, and it's like so many people have that perspective, and it was like when I started to notice that that was the same perspective that other sort of denominations had towards my beliefs, it was like, oh wait, crap. I guess just having this perspective isn't good enough as far as like feeling sure or anything.
Right. It doesn't decide for you whether this is true or not,
It's like
right?
it's a useful sort of like defense mechanism, but it doesn't really mean anything.
Right. It's a defense mechanism for you specifically.
Yeah.
It's all it is reassure yourself that no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. I have the truth. Like, I don't
Right.
have to worry about that.
Which
I have it.
the scary thing is that I don't know. I don't even think that you should try to totally get rid of that feature of like your cognitive abilities. Like that's I think in a lot of cases, I mean, everybody does this. So
Mhm.
it can't be just like inherently a flaw. It wouldn't sort of evolutionarily develop otherwise. It's like
Mhm.
in order to be confident enough to act out any sort of tradition of values, you have to sort of have some useful tools for dismissing other ideas that look kind of similar but aren't quite the same thing.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
otherwise, you're just going to be constantly in a state of, well, I'm not quite sure if this is the right way to be living. Maybe I should see if they know a better way. And then it's like you become so unsure of yourself. So it's like I don't even think that it's wrong. It's like that feature in you is totally normal, and
Mhm.
it's like, but sometimes it yields some terrible results.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, really the first time I learned to lie in Mormonism, I want to go back to this because this is the very beginning, where I was 8 years old. Mormons get baptized when they're 8 years old,
Mm.
usually, and I was
Is there a
8.
reason, like a symbolic number
That is
being
the
8?
quote unquote age of accountability. That's when you are
Oh,
old
okay.
enough to make choices and be responsible for your choices. Before that, you kind of get a free pass with God. It's
Right.
like, oh, you're only 7, you don't know
See,
that what you're doing is
we
wrong yet.
never canonized a specific date, like a specific age of accountability. That word is kind of thrown around of like there's like an abstract. There's a time where eventually you're sort of more responsible for your decision making, but
Oh,
like
okay.
you actually
So
had a
there,
number.
right.
That's
The
scary.
idea is there. But yeah, so in Mormonism, it's 8 years old. And it's like, at 8, congratulations. You are now ready to sign an eternal contract. Good job. Like, you've made it. And of
Yeah.
course, what kid isn't going to get baptized, right? Oh, mom and dad said it's the most wonderful thing ever. It's the best decision you'll ever make. And so, of course, I say, of course I'm going to get baptized. So I go, I get baptized, and everybody tells me you're going to feel warm and fuzzy. Like, those were the words, warm and fuzzy. You're going to feel
Mm.
warm and fuzzy. That's the Holy Spirit, right? You're going to feel warm and fuzzy when you're baptized. I didn't. And so I immediately thought something is wrong with me, but
Oh.
in order to fit in, I have to make sure that I say that's how I felt. And I
Mm.
remember distinctly telling people, yeah, I felt warm and fuzzy. And then I get this My Baptism book. It was this little book that you could fill out about who was there on your day of your baptism and to what the memory was like. And the first question in there is, how did you feel on your day of baptism? And I wrote in there, I remember consciously thinking, I have to say this just in case anybody reads this ever. I wrote warm and fuzzy. I
Oh,
remember distinctly,
shit.
like specifically writing warm and fuzzy
Oh.
because I thought if anybody ever reads this, like, I have to toe the line, right? Even
Man.
if I'm lying, I have to toe the line.
So you didn't even have a sense of like, did you do any sort of journal writing anywhere where you were able to sort of record your own thoughts and sort of really comfortably just analyze your own thoughts without being afraid somebody was going to like look at them?
Not up to that point, because I mean, I
Yeah,
wasn't
you were pretty
really
young
a
at that
great
point, right?
writer, right? I had to get my mom to help me to write things down and stuff, right? And so, my journal writing was pretty sparse. And now I write fairly regularly, probably at least once a month. I'll write in my journal, and and now I'm significantly more honest because one, I don't care, and two, I live on my own. I'm a grown adult. I'm not really worried about
Right,
somebody reading my journal, right? I
right.
feel like that's a very kid fear to have. But I remember even still writing in my journal as a young adult and as a teenager, writing in my journal and reassuring myself that this is true, this is true, this is true.
Hmm.
And I would talk about my relationship with Jesus constantly, constantly. I would talk about the things I love about the church and the gospel and all of this stuff. And in order to convince myself, right, I was writing it in there, very passionately. I'm sure if you went back, there
Wow.
was like this zeal
Yeah.
coming off the page, right?
Well, I imagine
All
there would be still a lot of emotion behind it because there's this
absolutely.
urgency to like to be doing it right and like really acting out what it means to be like a good Christian or a good Mormon.
Exactly, exactly. We had the one of the 12 apostles, who's the leadership of the church. One of the 12 apostles, he would always say the testimony is found in the bearing of it, right? This idea that
Mm.
if you want to have a testimony of the truthfulness of the gospel, you have to share your testimony, right? This idea that you have to say it out loud, right? And I kind of call this auto-indoctrination, right? You're convincing yourself of it. If
Right.
if all I ever tell you about, Garrett, are the awful things in my life, you're going to, one, think there's nothing but awful things in my life,
Right.
and two, I'm going to think there's nothing but awful
You're going
things
to
in my
more
life.
deeply
That's
identify with
all I
those. Yeah.
say, right? And so if all I write about in my journal is Jesus is amazing, Jesus is Lord, and the Mormon Church is true, and I love the Book of Mormon so much, I'm going to convince myself of it more and more and more. And I think, I don't know if I was, consciously doing that, but subconsciously I was definitely like, I got to bear my testimony. I got to share this. I got to put this out there. I have to
Yeah.
believe, right?
Man, that's so. It's sad to me. I don't know. It's just seeing that you had this passion, like you were just trying to do it right, like,
Mhm.
and then it all sort of backfires, and it's yeah, that's so frustrating to see. Just like whenever I don't know, like just getting to know you the little bit that I have, it's like you have, I don't know, you're a good guy. You were just trying
Thank
to be a
you.
good guy, and oh man, it's like I don't know what like in your situation, it's like when you're sort of being lied to. And I want to maybe explore that exactly what that means to be being
Mhm.
lied to in that context. But like when you're sort of surrounded by lies, it's like what even are you supposed to have done? Like I don't think. Do you look back and think, man, I should have noticed this sooner, or I should have like left sooner, or
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, because in my mind, I was raised my whole life. This was true. This was true. This was true, right? Try singing the ABCs in a different order, right? Like that's not a universal constant that the ABCs go in that order, right? It just so happens to be that the way that it historically fell in order, right? And so for me, I never questioned it. I never thought, because I was raised in it, this was everything that I knew. And so the idea that it wouldn't be true wasn't something that even crossed my mind. That didn't even make sense
mm,
to me. And so, it wasn't that I was trying to flee away from some other belief or anything else. I was just trying to make sure that I had the one true belief, right? The earth is round, the earth is round, the earth is round. Like I had to tell myself over and over again, the story that I was told growing up. And yeah, and then eventually I it started I started meeting more people outside of Mormondom, And I started to realize like the world is a lot more complicated than I
Yeah.
thought. And I don't have it all. I don't have like the truth.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, did you have a sense of feeling like you were? See, this is the thing I'm wondering is like when you're, it's not just like sort of an abusive relationship where somebody has like sort of fooled everybody and like they're the one to blame and everybody else is just victims. It's like there's a whole community here of people that were genuinely, cared about each other. There's a lot of genuine friendships and real, people live their lives here. It's not just like somebody fooled everybody. It's like there's actually there's layers of people being bought into this. And so like it's like, do you think of, I don't know, like the people that were teaching you? I wouldn't even think about that as being necessarily a lie unless they felt like they were lying. It's like you can say something that's not necessarily true without trying to lie to somebody, trying to deceive somebody. Did you have a sense of feeling like you were being lied to, or?
No, never. And even now, it's so weird because when I was I never thought I was being lied to or anything. Everybody was so earnest and sincere in their beliefs. And I think a lot of them still are, right? And so I never felt like I was being lied to. But then when I left, there was that hope almost that I had been lied to, because when I left, I was hoping in my head that somebody would say, "Oh yeah, no, I've known forever that it's not true. I'm glad you finally figured it out." I was hoping so bad that one of my friends, one of the adults in my life, like somebody there would have said like, "Oh, I'm glad you finally figured it out. I did too, but I had to stay in for X reason or whatever," right? I wish I could say they were lying to me, but they really believe it. They really sincerely believe it. And maybe that's better. I don't know.
I mean, I assume it would preserve some friendships, or at least it wouldn't, like, it's like if you suddenly realize that like the people that matter most to you have been intentionally lying to you and manipulating you for your entire life, that would feel pretty much like, okay, this relationship is over.
It's like, wow, thanks for that.
Yeah.
But then the problem is that I had felt for a while that it wasn't true. And so then when I left and everybody found out, then a lot of my friends felt like they had been lied to by me.
Right.
Because I had been lying to fit in.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and to some, it's like, I don't even know to what level that's a lie. It's like you have to sort of, if you're in a community and you're hanging out with people, then sometimes, I mean, like, this just goes into identity and self-presentation. It's like, are you lying whenever you act a certain way, even if you don't totally feel that way? It's like, no, you're performing like the character that you believe is truly you. And then when that character changes, then you perform differently. Like,
yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. And I think it's accurate too, because I was planning to stay forever, even when I didn't believe. I thought, I'll just stick in forever because this is where my family and friends are.
Right.
And I don't know what I'll do when I leave, right? I don't know who I'll be when I leave. And so I had that identity crisis where it's like, well, yeah, I'm pretending, but that's me, right? This is me trying to maintain being me in this culture with my friends. Right. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Okay, well, I can even sort of relate to that because a lot of, I see, it's weird, and I'm not sure if maybe you can relate to this too, where it's like I have a slightly more, I don't know, it's like in my relationship with faith, it was like, okay, I realize some of the things about my tradition specifically were mixed up. We got kind of taken over by a certain cultural movement, and it became about how to sell a message, and things that were not central became central, or things that just weren't even true at all became, core tenets of the faith. And it's like, okay, so I have this sense of like, okay, Christianity is still this deep, beautiful thing to me. I just don't understand it very well. And I'm like continuing to sort of get to know it. And so like, I a lot of the language that I grew up using, became sort of uncomfortable to me, but I felt like I had a sense of like, okay, in order to sort of compassionately engage with my peers and my community, I need to try to sort through that language and try to figure out how much of it I can comfortably use and comfortably engage with, so that way they still feel like this sense of connection, that like I value our tradition, our shared tradition, to a certain level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. That is really interesting. So what's your connection now? Like how do you strike that balance and still kind of use that same language and show that you value those relationships and those traditions, even though you're not in the same way involved physically or emotionally in it?
I mean, I'm not involved the same way physically, partially just because, you can't be involved in a church physically right now anyways.
That's true.
I've been kind of sort of reinvestigating and rethinking how it is that I can engage with my faith for the past maybe 4 years or so. And I'd experimented with going to different churches. At this point, I'm not really sure. I mean, I would like to be part of a church community. I would like to find a community where I really feel like I can. I mean, partly the problem is just like trying to theologically mesh with people a little bit. But as far as like, trying to relate to my family, especially because my family is deeply like in ministry. I mean, I shared with you a little bit on your podcast that like that's a couple generations worth of like my grandparents, my great grandparents, everybody was doing this Christian ministry thing. And so like it's deeply part of, especially my mom's side of the family, and my dad's side too. Like everybody, they were a slightly different denomination. They were Dutch Reformed, but it's like everybody around in my family is Christian in some form. And I mean, in general, there's a lot of just cultural Christianity. And so it's like, how do I not just be a dick and say, oh, that's all dumb? Like, because there are some even things that I'm like, oh, I do actually think that's kind of dumb. But like with my family, it's like, I'm not going to interrupt when my dad says, hey, let's pray for a meal. I think there's something meaningful about that. I don't necessarily pray in the same way, or even certainly believe the same things about prayer as certain members of my community do. I look at prayer as like, okay, this is this really ancient tradition that's like been meaningful to people for literally thousands of years. I don't know what it does exactly or why it's meaningful, but I even feel a sense of like of it sort of changing me, and like I don't know exactly what it does. It's like it's this sort of ritual thing. So it's like I do it, but it's like I approach it slightly differently. But I don't like try to just skip people up when they get into it, into something that I don't quite agree with, because again, I gotta have this impression that like I don't exactly know what any of this is about. I just have a sense that like there's something meaningful here, and like maybe you're seeing something from a perspective that I'm not, and there is, and you're seeing an angle of even something that's true that I just don't get.
Right. That's interesting. And what you're saying about prayer, about it being a ritual, yeah, I think that's big. And I grew up in my family, we said prayer before every single meal, and we said prayer in the morning and prayer in the evening, right? And we read scriptures together as a family every day. And, like these rituals were a huge part of my life. And so then I think, how will I include similar rituals that create a similar effect, right? But maybe detached from the mystical aspect of it. Right?
The key there though is like whenever, and this is what I'm still not exactly sure how to approach, is that whenever you want to try and strip away the mystical elements of something, you distill it down to what you understand to be important about it.
Right.
And so you potentially miss out on however much, I mean, maybe you miss out on the whole point of what it was there. It's like, and I don't, I mean, everybody sort of does this. Even traditions sort of do this. Everything, to the extent that you codify something, you exclude everything else that it could be. But it's like, I don't know. I guess my sort of rule of thumb that I try to use, it's a very loose rule, but just like the older and the longer a tradition has like been a meaningful part of different communities, the more I'm willing to sort of take that ritual seriously and like just try to, I don't know. So like, I really love praying the Lord's Prayer. It's like, that's
okay.
I can see some interesting things from sort of a poetic perspective. But I don't know. I don't know what it is that's happening. I mean, I even have this. I mean, you talked about this sort of warm fuzzies. It's weirder for me to unpack my experience because I've was part of some very, very like hyper charismatic tradition where like that was a huge part of it. And we didn't have to lie because a lot of us really felt these very overwhelming, ecstatic, almost psychedelic experiences of like jumping together and singing together and crying and weeping on the and praying for each other. There was like very energetic, very exciting, very emotional. And like, I don't know what all that was about.
I mean, it's the same feeling you get when you go to a concert. I had a buddy tell me once, he said, I feel the spirit when I go to raves.
Yeah.
He says, that's where I feel God. And he's an active every Sunday Mormon, but he added, he said, I go to raves and I feel the Holy Ghost, and I cry. And and I think it's that communal aspect, right? It's the same thing, even sitting watching Endgame, right? Where spoilers, when Cap gets the hammer, right? And he's like,
everyone cheers.
Assemble, everybody cheers, and you feel like I felt that same feeling of like the warm and fuzzies, where it's like, yes, we're winning. I am here with my team. I am here with people who understand me and love me and appreciate the things that I appreciate and care about. And it's the same as singing in a choir, right?
Yeah.
Or even just listening to good music, right? Whatever it is, there are so many things that bring that. And so I think the ritual changes, the way that we find those feelings change, the music we use changes, the words we use change, but it's all kind of in service of this communal feeling, I think, right?
Well, and it's like the sort of religious question is like, what is that all about? Where is that? Is that like directionally, is that going somewhere? Is it like maybe there's even a sense of like a feeling, I don't know if this is sounding getting new agey. I'm not even sure where my thoughts are going when I think about this. Is just like, okay, maybe everybody and everything can somehow come together like that in some sense, or like maybe that's, or at least that would be the extreme version. I don't know. I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah, and there is. I mean, so I think those feelings are really beneficial, and I know a lot of people when they do like shrooms and stuff, they get that feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's exclusive to religion, and they don't have a monopoly on it. And Mormonism, more than any other religion, I think, claims to have that monopoly.
Yeah. Well, so another thing I wanted to ask you about is what the first moment was. Like, what was the first like straw that kind of started the journey of, okay, I need to figure out what's going on here? Like the first thing that just, I don't know, did you have sort of an eerie moment where like things started to fall apart a little bit?
Yeah, I did actually. And so most people will be familiar with Mormons or the LDS people based on missionaries, right? You see the missionaries, they have the name tag that says elder or sister so-and-so, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they go around big smiles, giving out Book of Mormons and, telling you they've got the message of the restored church for you. Well, I went out for lessons with them. I never went on a mission myself because I didn't feel like my testimony was strong enough that I could go out and tell people to believe what I believed, right? And so I'd go out with the missionaries locally, though, and teach lessons with them to people investigating the church, for interested in it for whatever reason. And so we teach this lesson to this one guy, and during the lesson, he says, yeah, I've been kind of into Scientology lately. And I think, oh no, like this is going to be super awkward and weird. And then this young sister missionary who I'm still friends with, she was brand new. It was her first week on her mission. And she says, oh, really? What's that? Tell me about that.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, oh, like this is going to go off the rails. We're not going to get like our message in about Jesus and the gospel and blah, 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 right? But I was like, okay. And then he tells her all about it. And I could tell the look on her face. She was having such a hard time not laughing because it's ridiculous, right? Well, after the lesson, we leave and we're kind of walking down his driveway and headed to our cars. And I'm like, I'll explain a little bit more what Scientology is, right? Because he just explained, he was very vague, was just like, spaceship's going to come and save all of us, blah, 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 right? And I said, let me explain a little bit more about the origins of Scientology. And I'm like, L. Ron Hubbard, started this
Right.
thing. He wrote a book. He claimed it was true, blah, 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 whatever, right? And then the sister missionaries say, "What? That's crazy." And they laugh. They're like, "How could somebody believe that?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, we believe that a guy 2000 years ago, died so that we could be forgiven of a vague amount of things, and also so that he could understand how we feel for something. And then, in the 1800s, Joseph Smith, restored it and brought back that truth." And I was like, well, it's all kind of ridiculous. And it was in that moment that I was
You
like,
just you did this
all kind of ridiculous.
auto anti-apologetics.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like, in that moment, I was like, wait a second.
Just as you're walking through. So there's a guy and he writes a book and he gets everybody to believe it.
And then he takes their money. Wait a second. This is really fishy.
Suddenly
Yeah.
he has a whole bunch of wives.
Right. 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 And like, I was like, wait a second. Right. Like, it's just as ridiculous a story. Right. And and so I say, I think, okay, I gotta, take a moment here, and I start kind of thinking about it and start looking for things in Mormonism that actually do make sense.
Mm.
And they only made sense because I already accepted that the Book of Mormon was true,
Mhm.
right? And so I was thinking through it. One of the things missionaries will tell people is, well, you pray about the Book of Mormon, and if the Book of Mormon is true, that means Joseph Smith was a prophet. And if Joseph Smith was a prophet, that means the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is Jesus's restored church on the earth today. And I think, well, that doesn't really follow. If you pray about the Book of Mormon, you get a good feeling about it. I mean, you could do that with any book, and a
Mhm.
lot of them get a good feeling about it. But you do that with the Book of Mormon. Okay, let's say it is true. Joseph Smith is a prophet. There are a lot of religions, like we were talking about at the beginning. There's a lot of sects, a lot of denominations of Mormonism that also believe that. And so I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And I just kind of went through systematically. And then at one point, I just said, I don't care if it's true. I'm going to live it anyways. I'm going to stay in anyways. I'm going to get married in the temple anyways. I'm going to do it all
Wow.
anyways,
So you never
even if
talked
it's
to
not.
anybody about this? Like,
Never.
oh
I
wow.
never did.
You just had like you knew that this game's over if I tell anybody I'm thinking these thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the most I ever said, I had a couple friends who I told, I was like, yeah, I don't really care if it's true or not. I just kind of said, it doesn't matter to me if it's true or not. It's good. That's what I
Wow.
said. Yeah. Which, being out of it now, it's like, that's crazy.
Hmm.
But in the moment, it made
Well,
sense. That was my social structure. That was my life.
I'm interested to explore that for a second. So it doesn't matter if it's true, it's good.
Hmm.
Like in the context of your community and your relationships and like your ability to have like your own life. I mean, at this point you were how old? Like 15, 16?
No, I
A little
was
older?
22, I think. Well, I think at that point I was 21.
Okay.
Yeah, 21, maybe 22.
So you started, were you living on your own? Were you still living with
Yeah,
family?
I was moved out. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I'm just thinking about like to the extent that you have like it's like if you don't want to sort of chop all of your relationships out at once
Hmm.
and like I don't know like I think about so many communities like I don't know like there's hundreds and hundreds probably thousands of religions that have sort of developed throughout the different just
Yeah.
historically it's like
Oh, yeah.
would it have been better for people in those communities to just say this is actually not true and I'm not going to participate in my community anymore because like they didn't get it sort of as right as they should have.
Right. Yeah. That'd be detrimental to your survival as an animal,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
it's over, right? If I was stuck in my community and that's all I had, you bet I'd go to my grave believing it, because suddenly job opportunities, right? the love of my family, I'd always, oh, he's struggling, right?
Yeah.
It's only because I live in a broader community and have podcast friends now and other people that I can look to and rely on and help and strengthen, that then I can really feel like, okay, I can leave this behind.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a really difficult problem. It's a conundrum. It's a real conundrum to try to weigh out. Okay, what should I do here? And like I don't know. I can't obviously point at you and say like, oh, you should have just gone for it in that moment. It's like that. I don't know. So but when was the moment where you really started to? I mean, you said you started to talk to some more people kind of were the fringes of the Mormon community. Was there kind of some theological points that, I mean, you already pointed to that, like the core is that, okay, you have to believe that Joseph Smith is a prophet, and you believe that because of the Book of Mormon or because he translated. I mean, it seems like there's kind of a circular thing there, but like as long as you have a good feeling about one of them, you can kind of get the ball rolling.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You just have to, it's all good feelings all the way down.
It's good feelings all the way down. I was thinking about that a little bit because I had two. Well, I mean, this past week, anyways, just reading through this book, I had last night where I was just like, I even had dreams about these stories because I was really thinking about this book and these stories, and I was just like, every step of the way, I was like, okay, why doesn't that feel right to me? Is this just me doing this kind of thing where I want to sort of put down another religion so that way I feel more justified in believing what I believe, or is there something that doesn't make sense about that? So I was eager to like do some Googling around and find, oh yeah, there's a lot of really, like, I mean, I was noticed some kind of strangely anachronistic things, like where they talk about having windows in the barges, and like windows. Who would have known about windows in like 1000 BC? That doesn't make sense.
Also, these barges that
they managed to make them so tight that
tight like unto a dish.
Yeah, they say that so many times, like unto a dish.
Yeah. That's what Mormons say when you're like really close with somebody, when you're like best friends.
They're like unto a dish.
You're tight like unto a dish.
That's awesome. I love that.
There's like a whole
why is it unto a dish? Like, what? I don't see the comparison
because
there.
You hold soup in it, right? Like the soup doesn't fall out of the dish.
Yeah, but it's not because it's airtight. It's just that
right. But it's like the structure of it, right? Tight like unto a dish. It's waterproof. It contains something, right? That's what they
But not only this, they make it tight and then they make holes in it just in case they need to get some more air. And so like they're going to like this has to be some either really good engineering. I mean, I don't think you could do I don't think you could do that with wood.
In the top. They poke a hole in the top and a hole in the bottom.
Yeah.
And the idea is that it can roll over.
Yeah.
Right? Except you're pooping in there. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like a 6-month journey.
Yeah.
You're just like,
it's 100, I thought it's 300 something days. It's almost a year.
Something. Yeah. And then you've got honeybees in there. Like you're carrying other like plants and animals and livestock and stuff in there. What?
Yeah. So
like
pointing at that stuff, it's like, well, so how did you think about that when you were, when you were still in this, and like how people within your community, do people get caught up on stuff like that, or they're just kind of like, the Lord did something miraculous?
Yep. It's all miracles. It's all like, you don't think like, oh, wait a second. This doesn't make any sense. Oh, and that doesn't make any sense. Oh, and there was already natives there. Mm-hmm. Oh, and they did DNA studies on Native Americans.
And they don't match up to anybody from Israel.
Yeah.
And I also when I was reading, I was like, okay, so the things popped up for me. Okay, there's got to be archaeological problems here. There's got to be DNA problems.
Yeah.
There's got to be linguistics problems, and then
so many linguistic problems.
Well, I mean, my wife studied linguistics in Montreal, so she has her degree, and cool. I got to like. I know nothing about linguistics. If she watches this, I want you to know, Angie, I'm not claiming that I know anything about linguistics. But at least hearing her talk about this stuff sometimes, and I got to attend a few classes, it made me interested. So I started doing a lot more Googling whenever I saw an interesting word and like reading etymologies and stuff like that. And so I've at least have a little bit of I'm saying that I at least have a tiny bit of a grasp on like how linguistics works and how languages evolve a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, so I just noticed all these different phrases that didn't seem to sort of make sense, and then also I noticed all the names. He made up all these interesting names. I'm like, those don't sound. I mean, some of them are just straight up just lifted from the Old Testament, but a lot of those don't sound very Hebrew. And I think you would be able to translate them back into like a Hebrew dialect and figure out what the names meant. And like when I look at the the Hebrew text, like you're able to on the internet, you can go to this website Blue Letter Bible, and you can look at the Old Testament and you can see the original languages, and you can do word studies on the ancient languages and stuff like this. And there's not this kind of closed off room where there's the Christian scholars and then there's the other historical scholars. It's like everybody uses the Old Testament as like an important text for talking about studying ancient Hebrew and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, because it was, like the Bible has historical context, right? Like some of the things in the Bible actually happened. Some of the things sort of happened.
Yeah.
And then some of them
are just myth
stories passed down.
Yeah.
Right. But then the Book of Mormon is written on this, like, it all happened.
I know. Well, that's the other thing I noticed is I was like, okay, this is whole thing is written based on some really kind of very characteristic of 1800s, 1900s Protestantism understandings of how to read the Bible. And like, this is not the way people read the Bible today. We know this isn't the way the Bible is written, and this is not what the Bible is trying to get at. Like, the Bible isn't written to be a 2000s historical document for us to like look at and kind of read information the way we would have written it down. It's like we're studying ancient cultures every time you're looking at a different book, and different intentions for how you would write down events and how you'd write down stories and what they thought was important. And like, so like you get so many numbers that are way off because of having sort of poetic or like numerological significance, and so many days and so many people's like the story of David and Goliath. Like originally, I think that there's an actual giant that was killed by somebody. I forget what his name is, but that wasn't like the historical King David did not kill a giant before he became king. There was another guy, and that story was like cool, so they kind of plugged it into the David story because like, okay, we're talking about being kingly. Here's a kingly story.
Right, exactly. Like it gets mixed together. And one of the things, so the Book of Mormon, I mean, there's so many issues with it, but one of the things, the Book of Mormon quotes directly from the Book of Isaiah. So the way the story goes, Lehi, Nephi, and their whole family brought over the Bible, right? Like they took the Bible written on plates from Israel, and they took it to the Americas with them, right? So somewhere there is somewhere, according to Mormonism, somewhere on the American continent, there is a Hebrew Bible written on plates that is somewhere out there to be found. So go looking, get out there, do your digs. But Nephi quoted, they left Jerusalem in 600 BC, right?
Right.
Nephi quotes a bunch of Isaiah, like a huge block of Isaiah, right? Apparently, the general understanding is that Isaiah was written in two time periods, and there's a huge portion of Isaiah that is quoted in the Book of Mormon that was supposedly, according to historians and archaeologists and such, this portion of Isaiah was written after Nephi supposedly left Jerusalem. Right. So it like doesn't even make sense that they would be quoting that portion of Isaiah. Like it doesn't even make sense.
Right. Well, it's like so much of this sort of makes sense given, okay, if you're living in the 1800s and nobody has access to the internet, like right. I could see why I would buy into this, especially if my community was like, okay, this is, God has spoken to us. I don't know.
Right. There's exciting. It's thrilling.
Tom Holland movie that I watched last year, and it was so unnerving to watch because it was this kind of creepy religious stuff where I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. The Devil All the Time. Have you seen that movie?
Okay. No.
Maybe watch it. Maybe don't. I don't know.
Maybe. Okay.
It made me feel like super uncomfortable, but I really liked it. But it was like this. There was a lot of these kind of really fiery preachers. It was like set in the time of the 1800s. It wasn't about Mormonism. It was about like just Protestantism during that time, or just like some people who like were generally religious during that time. There's so much like these, I don't know. It's just because looking at Protestantism at that time, it was like suddenly a lot of the institutional Christianity had broken down, and it became this new free market of like who could pitch the best, most exciting version of religion. And so there's like almost like people traveling around like showmen, like doing miracles and like like putting dangerous, poisonous things on them and showing the Lord's favor on them that they won't kill them. And man, I'm going to spoil this for you, but maybe it'll make you, I don't know. In the movie, there's this one guy who's like really trying to like exercise his faith, and he kills his wife so that way he can resurrect her from the dead.
Oh,
it is such a horrifying sequence, man.
Yeah.
And it just it makes you take such a hard look at yourself and any religious sense of like identification, and like, okay, how comfortable am I with the things that I'm believing, and are any of them leading to that?
Right. And it's like, if God told you to kill somebody, would you do it? Right? That's the question.
Right.
And it's like, some people are like, well, yeah, it's God telling me to do it. It's like, how do you know it's God? Right? Oh, well,
I got the
know
four
what
fuzzies.
Like, right? Okay, but what if somebody else has that feeling too? Oh, well,
Yeah.
they're not really speaking to God.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to God though. I know I'm speaking to God. They're not. They're wrong. Right? It's that whole like, I'm right, you're wrong, even though we're basing it on the exact same evidence.
Yeah,
exactly. And it makes people do awful, crazy things. Right?
And that was one of the scariest moments I had when I was in Bible school, is that somebody, my roommate had started meeting with some Mormons and was chatting with them about their faith. And he was like, he had it in mind to like try to prove to them that they were wrong and try to convert them or something like that. And he got to this point where, he's asking like, why is it that you believe that this book is true? Why is it that you believe in Joseph Smith is a true prophet? And they talked about that just feeling of it's confirmed in our spirit. We prayed and we really feel that, that this book is true and that Joseph Smith is a true prophet. And then I had this moment of like, okay, I was 17, 18 at the time. And I had, wait, why do I believe in the Bible? Isn't that the reason we're supposed to believe in it? It's just in here, right? You just, God confirms it for you, right? And as soon, something clicked that day, and I was an atheist for at least 2 or 3 days. I forget what it was that brought me back, that I felt like I could truthfully sort of say I was a Christian again. But like, when I just had that moment of like, oh crap. No, I think it was that we went to some like theological seminars. Somebody said something that made enough sense to me that I was like, okay, I can at least, maybe I can get behind that. I don't know what it was though.
Right. And that's why you meet together, right? That's why you come every Sunday. That's why in Mormonism, it is so imperative that you show up every single Sunday, because you have to reaffirm that faith with everybody else, right? You have to reaffirm that this is my community. Everybody else in my community believes it, so I better too.
Beyond just like the simple, okay, I don't think that the Book of Mormon is a real, historical book or anything like that, or like seeing it as sort of a hoax. Do you like digging a little deeper into sort of Mormon theology or like philosophy of life? How do you like see your life differently, or like want to live your life differently than like, are there some like serious values problems you have with the way Mormonism works?
That's a good question. Generally, I still live by the same values. I still don't drink coffee. I just don't imagine I'd enjoy it. Also, I know caffeine doesn't sit well with me. So, I mean, that's a thing too. Still, I think alcohol smells disgusting. So still never had that. Like, so like, as far as values, like the lifestyle, I still basically live that. But then other values, I don't know. Like the things Mormons really hold important, like the whole there's a document in Mormonism called The Family, a Proclamation to the World, and it's basically there's male and female. We're meant to be together. This is God's way. This is the only way. That kind of thing. Yeah, I totally disregard that. I'm like, be with who you want. Like, if that's making you happy, who cares, right? Like, why is that my business, right? Yeah, I think being nice to people, that's something Mormon Church teaches. That's the thing, is that the good things about Mormonism are not even kind of sort of unique, right? The good things about Mormonism is like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's nice.
Yeah.
Everybody can get behind not killing,
Yeah.
right? Like, I feel like that there's some pretty simple truths there, right? But every parent teaches their child that, whether they believe in God or believe in a different God or don't believe in God at all, right? It's kind of, I don't know. So I take all the good stuff, which is the good stuff everybody also has. So
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that's probably, I think to people who still appreciate faith, I don't want to put that on you. I haven't asked you about that, and I want to hold off on that question yet.
Mhm.
But like, as far as like practicing any sort of faith tradition, I think you have to really pay attention to balancing those things. Like, you can't just sort of take all of your values from one totally disconnected place in your life where it's like, okay, everything about the way I live comes just from reading this list of rules. Because for one thing, even if you had sort of a like some people's experience with the Bible is they feel like it's a list of just like a guide for how to live your life.
Mhm.
If you are trying to interpret, especially a really ancient text like that yourself, just by yourself, you're going to, I mean, this is the whole, I think one of the biggest problems that evangelicalism and Protestantism in general has sort of struggled with is that there's such an emphasis on sort of the personal relationship with Scripture, where it's like, okay, I'm going to figure out what this means. And it's like, okay, I don't know how qualified everybody even is to sort of read the Bible.
Right.
But like
it's a big piece of literature, right? Yeah.
And so like I think it's cool. I think it's great actually to have an experience trying to read the Bible, but it needs to be. I don't think of religion as, again, like I thought it was interesting that you talked about how religion is like in your life it was like every day of the week. I think of it that way too, but I don't think that it's like every day of the week has to, in order for it to be religious, it has to be a planned religious event within the Christian or within the sort of church institution. I think of religion, especially historically, like looking at so many different religions that have developed, is like religion is just it's just the pattern of your life, right? And so it should sort of like, to some extent, if you are participating in a religion, it should just be your life. And so an extension of that thinking would be that, okay, so that doesn't mean that the way you derive your values is from one specific part of your life. It actually is going to be a huge conversation of every faculty you have available to you. You're going to have conversations, and that's going to feed back into your understanding of what's good and what's valuable to pursue. You're going to listen to music, and so music is going to be moving to you, and it's like that's going to reshape a little bit about your values, about what is beautiful and what is worth pursuing. You're going to talk to smart people who are good at lecturing or good at teaching, and it's like that's going to feed back in there. You're going to have experiences where you read something really meaningful. It might be in the Bible, it might be in other religious books, it might just be a philosophy, it might be whatever. Might be Harry Potter, and that's going to feed back again into, it's like if you take all of your values just from one place, you're playing a really, really risky game because you have no sort of fail-safe. Nothing's feeding back into that system, and it's just like if there's an error there, it's going to really play out in a bad way because you have nothing in your life to sort of call it out or buffet some of the mistakes you're making.
Right. And it is interesting talking about where religion fits in your life, and I really think, like, I took it seriously, right?
Yeah.
It was everything. Like I mentioned, for years I just only listened to church music, right? I took it so seriously.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't, like, what are you doing, right? If this is eternity you're talking about, if this is, especially in the Mormon faith, if this is your ticket into heaven or not, what are you doing? Take it easy, relax a little bit, right? How can I relax on the most important thing in the universe, right?
Exactly.
And so it was my whole lifestyle. That was it.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you're at you're at a different place now in life, and do you have any sense of an affinity for religion? Do you have any? It's just like that. That's something that's behind me.
Yeah, yeah. I think I appreciate religion. I'm fascinated by religion, right? I think it is this huge part of culture and of history and of people's real lived experiences right now, right? So I don't think religion doesn't matter, right? I think people take it way too seriously and way too far, and I really think it is far better being looked at as it's an interesting story. What does that mean to me, right?
Right.
I think that's far more important. Organized religion, I have more of a problem with, and evangelizing, I am anti-evangelizing.
Yeah.
Keep it to yourself. That I'm really glad that's important to you, but you know what? The like evangelism, believing that you have the truth and and it is your God-given duty and responsibility to share the truth. That's how we got residential schools. Like that I have a problem with. Mormon missionaries, I get it. They're brainwashed kids. If they knock on my door, I'll feed them, chat with them, whatever. But I do not appreciate what they're being made to do, and I want to be really clear about that. They're not going out because they really, really buy it. They're going out because they've been raised to buy it. I was there too.
You said a second ago you had a sense like, okay, if this is eternity we're talking about, this is the most important thing. You have to take this seriously. With that out of the equation, though, I imagine there's still this that sense of like wanting to take life seriously and live life sort of truthfully. That wasn't just the Mormon part of you. I assume that was the real Alex.
Yeah. I think that's why I took Mormonism seriously, right? Because if this is my life, I'm going to take it seriously. That's why with podcasting, right? I take my podcasts seriously, right? I work hard to make something good, right? I put that effort in. And so, that is me taking it seriously. Not to say that I'm like a stick in the mud or anything, right? But
so what's the difference between taking it seriously and you said you don't like how some people take religion sort of too seriously, but that's a problem that can sneak into just about any occupation or any community thing. It's like how do you take something seriously without taking it seriously?
Right. I think this is something I've really had to work on because growing up, I had a lot of anger problems and I would get frustrated. The littlest things would set me off. And so I've worked really hard that, okay, I publish a podcast. Oh, the audio's bad, right? If I'm interviewing somebody and the quality doesn't come back great, it happens.
Yeah.
Right. If I publish it and then there's an issue getting it into Apple Podcasts for whatever reason, like it doesn't pick up in the feed, relax. It happens. I take my work seriously. What I can do, what I can control, I take that seriously. Everything else, out of my hands, right? It's the serenity prayer some people might be familiar with, right? Grant me the grace to...
I know the one you're talking about, but I forget the
things
specific
I can't
words.
control, like basically accepting things you can't control.
And taking responsibility for what you can.
Take responsibility for what you can.
Yeah.
And be wise enough to know the difference.
Right. Oh, yeah, That's the last part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the key. The part of the prayer that I forgot is the most important part of it. Is like it's a really, really, really difficult task to actually discern your responsibility in the world and like what is it? Because you said you're anti-evangelism. I think in general I'm probably with you there, but I don't even. Depending on how kind of loose I am with the word evangelism, I don't think that there's almost anything you can do that's not evangelizing a certain set of values, because whenever you're acting, that's an expression of what you deem to be valuable and the kind of life you think is worth living. And it's like you're evangelizing that to the extent that you're not even just talking to people, but just engaging with people, whether or not you bother to look them in the eye, whether or not you open a door, I don't know, spending time with people. These are all forms of sort of sharing ideas. And I think propositional sharing ideas, that's interesting and good to do sometimes, especially if people are interested in it. But like, there's no getting around sharing ideas.
Right. And I am pro sharing ideas. I should be very clear. Share your ideas. I think free speech and sharing things is super, super important. The thing I'm anti is the knock on your door. Hey, just a heads up, you're going to hell.
Specific model. Yeah.
Oh man. What I'm doing. Right. It's the very the manipulative, right? It's the car salesman, right? Yeah. The dirty car salesman, right. Where it's like, oh, but if you don't buy this new car with these new safety features, your child will die in your backseat because your car doesn't have the updated features, right? It's that kind of thing. It's
when there's this hidden motive of trying to get a certain transaction to happen.
Yeah. Right. Even if it's sincere, even if you really, really believe like this will be good for you, say you're a huge Doctor Who fan, right? And you're like, Alex, you need to watch Doctor Who, right? That's fine. You can tell me to watch Doctor Who. I've watched Doctor Who before. It's fun. Sure.
Yeah.
But you coming over and saying, no, Alex, something really awful is going to happen in your life if you don't watch Doctor Who. Or, oh, your sister just died. Oh, that's really sad. Watching Doctor Who will help that. And not only will it help comfort you, but if you watch Doctor Who, you'll get to see your sister again. And it's like, oh, well, now of course I'll do it, because your new friends that you made, these really nice young kids who knocked on your door, you trust them, you like them. And if you don't join, you lose those friends, right? There's like all of these other things that help to convert you, right? And to get you in. It's not just like, oh, that sounds nice. It's, well, don't you love your family? Right? That's what I have a problem with.
Jeez, yeah. Is there like a specific, like signing a paper or praying a certain prayer that like when you're like, now you snapped, you're actually confirmed and they've got another soul?
Yeah. So you get baptized. And then you have your confirmation. Sometimes right after the baptism, sometimes it's like the next day at church in front of the whole congregation. And then it becomes like they lay their hands on your head and give you this blessing and give you the Holy Ghost. And then like the whole ward is there, the whole community is there. And he's like, wow, now you're one of us. Welcome to the fold. Right. And so it's this kind of ritual. And yeah, you sign a paper as well, and you get your name put on the records and pay 10% of your money for the rest of your life. Congrats.
Is there like an auto deposit? Like they set it up with your bank account?
I don't think there's an auto deposit. Well, I guess
a lot of Christians that I knew
automatically
growing up, it was like there's a sense of like, because there's the same idea of like tithe. That's a big part of most iterations of Christianity, most denominations. Right. But a lot of people just kind of like don't do it.
No, Mormonism, it's part of that interrogation with the bishop.
Okay.
Worthiness interview is, are you a full tithe payer? And they can see how much you're paying.
Oh man.
And so
they know whether you're lying or not.
Yeah. But there are some, and again, depends on the bishop. There are some Mormons who will pay their 10% to a different charity that they think will do more with it. Pretty much any charity will do more with it than Mormonism. And so some people will pay to the charity of their choice and say, yes, I'm a full tithe payer. I choose to pay my tithing to X charity. Okay. That is not encouraged. You will never hear that talked about in church, but there are people that do that.
Interesting. Okay. One thing I noticed earlier this year when I first was trying to, I don't know, for some reason, like I said, I saw an ad for Mormonism, or I saw an ad for Jesus Christ, and I was like, I don't know many Christian denominations that advertise. This is probably the Mormons. So I clicked on it, and I ended up going onto like a little chat, and I was like, it would be really cool. I mean, I kind of wondered about this tradition all my life. It would be interesting to talk to somebody who's been through this, especially somebody who like currently values it. And so I wanted to talk to a missionary, and so I chatted with for a little while, and then they started sending me some emails, and then I was like, yeah. So I'm doing this project called This Could Be Interesting, where I'm just trying to break down some barriers between communities and just try to get better at at intercommunal relationships, at talking to people who have different values than me, and seeing if I can kind of glean some things from other people's perspective, or just get better at listening to people and not sort of discarding other people's ideologies. I'd love to talk to you guys. I'd love to have you on the show. And she's like, oh, actually, there's a rule against missionaries being recorded in public.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh. I mean, I guess I kind of get that, but that's a little, I mean, it's a little sad, a little bit frustrating, and a little bit of like, that should be a bit of a red flag.
Right. Yeah, the church has a big PR department, lots of marketing. They put a lot of money into it every year.
But so why do you think it is that they're, I mean, do they talk about this? Like why you're not allowed to be, I mean, how far do they take that rule as far as like not being allowed to be recorded?
Oh, that's just a missionary thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course any member of the church would, probably make it pretty clear, like, oh, I'm just speaking as a Mormon. I'm not speaking for the church. Right. Like they'd probably make that distinction. Usually, I guess, but there's no like, no, you can't talk to the media thing.
I guess the biggest thing is just like there's a fundamental values thing there that doesn't, or that kind of scares me, and that like I wonder how you think about it now as far as like, well, I don't know. I there's talking to people from other communities, but then there's just talking to your family anyways. And like, I talked to you a little bit, I mean, as far as how I'm currently trying to engage with and value the way that the different Christians I know, how they practice the religion. How do you, as, I mean, you're not religious at all at this point. How do you still engage with your family? I mean, do you still have a good relationship with your family? Do you have to really walk on eggshells in those conversations, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I am super lucky. I know a lot of people who leave the church don't have it as good as I do. I still chat with my family. I called my mom earlier today and chatted with her for 45 minutes, while she was gardening. And so I still have a really good relationship with my family. Everybody's respectful. Nobody's trying to like, come back to church. Why don't you come to church? Every now and then there's, a small remark made and I make a remark back, and then that's kind of the end of it. Like I'm really fortunate, still have a great relationship with everybody in my family. And I'm also lucky because it's only my mom, dad, and siblings that are members of the church. And so, I don't have cousins and uncles and aunts and grandparents who are also, like, oh, that's so sad that Alex went astray, right? It's only my really immediate family.
Okay, so you have other family that's not in the church?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I'm not, it's not like a huge family. I have a pretty small family, but we're all pretty close. And yeah, so they don't care. They're more happy than anything that I figured it out. So
that's interesting. So, I mean, do you have some hope for sort of the future of, I don't know about the future of the Mormon. Well, I mean, the Mormon Church is the people, right? It's not like, I mean, there's a theological tradition, but then there's the people actually participating in it. And like,
yeah,
where are those people headed? Do you think, I mean, especially if your family, are they a pretty usual Mormons? Like, are they're willing to put up with and respect your choices?
Yeah, I'd say my family is a little bit more liberal than the average, not by a ton, but I'd say they're definitely on the more chill, relaxed side of things. Especially my siblings are, and so yeah, really fortunate. As far as the church itself, now I know you said the church is the people, but I think the Mormon Church is the money in the bank. They've got over $100 billion in the bank, and billions of dollars in assets, and so.
Yikes.
The Mormon Church is huge, and I don't think it's going to, stop anytime soon. But there are a lot of people who are stopping going, and I think people are becoming more nuanced and starting to piece it together.
It's harder and harder to kind of prop up a narrative, like when it's made up, and especially when there's as many kind of different little straws you can poke at, and and start feeling like, oh, this doesn't make sense. I mean, in the age of the internet, anyways, it's just like there's way too much access to just. This is the thing that it's just there's access to information, but it's like whenever you build an institution based on a lie, eventually that. I mean, this is a common theme in every children's TV show ever. You know, the main character tells a lie, and then somebody asks them something that's sort of kind of related to that lie, so they have to lie again, and then somebody else, and then there's like this whole web of lies that gets built up, and then eventually there's no way to prop it up anymore. It's gonna fall down, and my intuition makes me think that there's no way that's not going to happen in some fashion. I mean, it's happening to some extent for smaller people, but I mean for smaller people, for people on a smaller scale is what I meant. But like that's if it's the case, and I think you and I both believe that this is the case, that this book was made up as a hoax by Joseph Smith, then sometime this thing's going to come crashing down. Like,
right,
it has to.
But that's what you think, right? But these things develop, and people believe what they want to believe, whether it makes sense or not, right? At one point, the support for vaccines was a lot higher than it is today, right? And at one point, the acceptance that the Earth was round was a lot higher than it is today, right? And so people are still going to believe whatever they want to believe. But what you're saying about the lie getting bigger and bigger is absolutely true. Ironically, the Mormon Church put out, I think in the 70s and 80s, these Mormon ads. And they were just like these ads about good values and stuff. And one of them is this kid, he's got yarn tied around his mouth, and he's holding a little piece. And the caption says, "Big lies can start with a little yarn." And that's exactly what happened. Joseph was telling some stories, and now it's turned into a $100+ billion business.
Sounds like whoever made that ad might have had a 22-year-old Alex experience of big lies start with, wait a second. Yeah. Just but
one little thing.
I saw I saw the pictures of the temple in Utah. Have you ever been there?
Yeah, I've been there. I haven't been inside that temple, but
oh wow,
been there.
Are there a lot of huge buildings like that?
Yeah. Well, not that big, but they have a lot. Let me look up how many Mormon temples. Okay, there are over 130 temples. I think there are over 150, and then they've announced. Okay, so there's 160 currently operating, and then there's 39 under construction and 45 announced. Like, they have a ton of these buildings.
They're still really expanding.
Oh, they're expanding the buildings, right?
Okay.
Because it's marketing, right? You put up this big fancy building in a neighborhood, and people, oh, what's that? Right? And it gives the illusion of growth. The church is not growing.
Do you know what the numbers are? Are the numbers going up even by a small amount?
The numbers themselves are going up. Relative to Earth's population growth, though, it's going down. And those also don't account for people who just said, you know what, I'm not going to go anymore.
Right. Those their names still on the documents or whatever.
If your name's on the records, you're still going.
Once saved, always saved.
Estimated, the church has like a 30% activity rate. So they claim 16 million people, but about 30% of those people are all that show up.
So I don't know. I mean, with what you're telling me here, it sounds like we're at those. It sounds like we're in the last days, man.
Yeah. It's big though, right? Like,
but if it's just big empty buildings, I mean, that's going to be the weird thing, is that, like, okay, so if this tradition ever does just like kind of totally peter out, and like maybe there's just a whole bunch of money left, or somebody decides, I don't know. I would wonder. I mean, if the people sort of in leadership kind of had a moment of, oh crap, we need to figure this out, because isn't that somewhat what happened with the sort of the splitting off of the other denomination. I forget what they're called.
There's the FLDS,
Community
and the
of Christ.
RLDS. Community of Christ is
Community of Christ is quite a bit more liberal. They'll have women who are in leadership. They're not against gay marriage.
Yeah, they're a lot more chill on like every level. I don't even think that they claim the Book of Mormon to be a historical document anymore. I think they even say like it was written by Joseph Smith, and Oliver Cowdery and whoever else might have contributed.
See, I would be interested to talk to some, especially like a theologian in that community, because I would imagine. See, this is the weird thing, is that I'm like wondering, like, just when you get in this sort of mode to write, okay, you're thinking about biblical literature and you want to write that sort of a story. If there's almost something that's like a primal sense of like the way things are that takes over a little bit, and like even if you're just sort of trying to bullshit and just write a story that sounds biblical, you might sort of accidentally tap into, I don't know how.
Right.
I just was thinking about that the other day. It's like people have been sort of looking at these stories and discussing them. I watched like a podcast of some different like guys, like, I don't know, higher up in Mormon leadership, just talking about these stories and pulling stuff out of them that I'm like, that's interesting that you got that kind of values. I don't know. You pulled something interesting out of that story that seemed pretty bland and strange to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can find stuff in anything. Like,
that's the weird thing.
Mormonism more than any other religion, I bet, teaches you how to BS.
Yeah.
Like just all the way through life.
But what's the difference between like straight up BSing and sort of having a prompt and just sort of creatively running with it? And like I think like you can just bullshit as when you're trying to sort of like, if you have an agenda, that's the kind of bullshitting I think is the problem. But if somebody just says like, hey, here's a story, talk about it for a little bit, and you're just like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to talk about it. That's something different. That's like improv, and improv is a really weird sort of, I don't know. It's like a weird sort of truthful way of just like, it's like you're not trying to say something true, and it's like because you're not trying something more, I don't know, something that's a part of you anyway, sort of comes out because you're not as inhibited.
Right. So maybe Mormons are good at improv. I don't know. It's like I do think that we're taught, how to teach lessons and stuff, and usually you don't prepare anything, like you're supposed to. You show up and you just kind of ramble on until something intelligent comes out. I didn't prepare for this podcast at all. Like this whole time, I'm just like, oh, you ask a question. Let me, pull out something that I have in my head. Right. It's the same thing. Right. We're just taught the words that you use. Right.
Right. There's a language to kind of pander to.
Yes. There is a huge like language culture.
Got to get those these and thous and whence he cames.
Oh, brother. And it came to pass.
Oh my God. There's so many and it came to passes.
I know.
That was when I was like, okay, this guy's just trying to fill space in. Like, stop saying it. Okay, I know it came to pass. All this came to pass according to you. Yeah.
And the best part is everybody in Mormonism, like you're raised to think like, there's no way Joseph Smith could have ever written this because it's such an inspired and incredible work of literature. And you always think that growing up. And then when you leave, you're like, it wasn't that impressive. Like, I'd rather read Old Man and the Sea.
Wait, what's that book?
It's by Ernest Hemingway, and I hate it. It's it won him I think it was the Nobel Prize or some award, some big award that I don't think he deserved for that book. I thought it was garbage. I didn't enjoy it at all. But I guess somebody did at the time it was written.
Well, see, that's the other part of just reading, like just the problem of literature in general is that like so many people, I feel like I've been trying to read more this past year or two, and like realizing there's actually such a huge sort of difficulty curve of like learning how to read. Like there's learning how to read, but then there's learning how to actually engage difficult material. And like, that's not something that just anybody can do. And when I think about, especially like looking at, I'm finding so much appreciation for all these other sort of different religious traditions, like especially looking at a lot of old mythology, like Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Mesopotamian mythology. These are like on surface level, sometimes they're sort of interesting. Sometimes they're just straight up weird. But like trying to like actually dig into those stories and find something deep there. It's like that takes expertise. That takes time. That takes imaginative abilities. It takes sometimes historical. I mean, it probably should take more historical knowledge than what I bring into the table. But like,
right.
It's interesting to. I'm not really sure where I was going with that. I guess I'm just thinking about that, like
reading and really digging into it and understanding what you're reading and appreciating what you're reading as well. Maybe that's my problem with Old Man and the Sea. Maybe there's some historical context that I'm not understanding or something, right? But me as a reader, I did not enjoy it at all. There are other classics that I love, right? And there are other books that I love and other things that I get out of those. And maybe somebody else gets something else out of it, right? And
I guess that's what I was thinking about, is that there's a lot of sort of critically claimed to be great literature that I wouldn't understand to be great. So it's like, it's interesting looking at the Book of Mormon and looking at other religious texts, and like, as a person who's like not an expert in old literature, there's in some ways I can kind of point to some key differences, but like I'm such a lay person. It's like, in order to really be able to tell whether or not one's a great work of literature and another one's not, it's like I'm not even qualified to make that claim.
Right. But you can still say whether or not you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yes.
That's subjective.
I mean, the whole time I was trying to read the Book of Mormon, I was like, okay, I got to get through this. Not because it was like I could try to psych myself up and think, okay, maybe there's actually something really interesting there. But after getting through a little bit of it, it was like, okay, this doesn't actually feel that well written. But I want to get through it because I care about engaging with Alex's story. I want to tap into this little moment that he had and be able to talk about this with him because. Well, I mean, because this relationship at least would be more important to me than whatever Joseph Smith has to teach me.
Right. But the book is a snooze fest, so I appreciate you putting forth your best effort to go through that, because it's not like a fun, engaging read at all.
There was some fun moments, at least noticing the strange technologies that were referenced and stuff like that. It was fun when I made a game out of trying to prove that it was wrong.
Yeah. That feels good. I have thought about like going back through it now, because before, when I went through it, I would mark down, all the parts where it mentions Jesus and how inspiring that was and blah, blah, blah. And now I think it would be interesting to go back, and me, just as a casual reader, looking and seeing like, that didn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. What is that? What's that supposed to mean?
Yeah.
And just kind of casually, but I guess I have more context, so I wouldn't be able to just like casually go through it.
Yeah. You probably would get sucked into a bit of just remembering different moments in your life. I don't see a version of that story, at least going through the whole thing, that doesn't end in probably some crying moments of like, if you're going to go through and start processing all that deep stuff, it's like going through all of your own, I don't know, maybe I'm just reading something there.
I mean, maybe I haven't tried it yet, so maybe I'll have to let you know.
It's been a while since I've sat through and tried to like read a lot of the Bible myself either, where like I've read it a little bit over the past while, usually if there's like something specific I wanted to read, but I haven't had the same experience of like, because I mean, a lot of my experience with the Bible growing up was very much the same as yours, of like just trying to read it and think that it's good and like will some holiness into myself. But it's trying to figure out how to do that well is an interesting new experience for me. But dude, anyway, I don't want to take up the whole rest of your day here. Thank you so much for taking some time to share this with me. I know this is like kind of personal stuff.
I'm fine. It was fun. I liked it. It's interesting to kind of process it a little bit with somebody else and get your reaction as somebody who wasn't raised in it.
Yeah. And
kind of hear what you think looking in. While also still having you relate just on the hardcore Christian kind of perspective.
Yeah, man. This has been enlightening for me too, and just like causing me it's caused me to do a lot of self-reflection, and I don't think that's going to stop. I think that this conversation and this whole digging into this for a little bit is going to stick with me for a while.
Yeah, I think, the unexamined life is not worth living, right? You have to self-reflect.
That's got to be somebody got to have written that before you. That's a good quote.
Yeah, I think that's Socrates.
Okay.
Who said that? I think
he was a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
I actually just learned the other day that apparently, I feel maybe kind of dumb saying this, but I didn't realize that it goes Socrates, and then Plato, and then Aristotle, and then Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was a direct connection there of mentorship.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like anyway, that's another tangent. We should leave that for another day.
Yeah.
But thanks again, man. I'm looking forward to keeping up with you and chatting off mic.
Yeah. I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, dude. Well, that was interesting. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to share it with a friend. Or even better, take whatever you found interesting here and go and have a real face-to-face conversation with somebody that you care about or somebody that you don't understand very well. I think face-to-face conversation is one of the most important tools that we have for building and maintaining real relationships and real communities. Many institutions in our lives have an incentive to crowd out these longer, more engaging interactions with short-form junk food content. I get it. They're just trying to make money. The point of this project for me is to spend some time pushing back against some of those forces in my life. I want to practice listening to and engaging with people that I don't necessarily understand very well. I also want to spend some time listening to and learning from some people who seem to have a good track record of listening to and engaging with people that they disagree with. If you're interested in working on some of this stuff too, feel free to keep up with this project by subscribing and pressing the little bell thingy that lets YouTube know that you want to keep seeing these videos. I really think that if we can get better at conversation, we might actually change the world. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.